What?
It is 4 p.m. We're bringing developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao. Some stories you're watching this Tuesday, May 20. The Supreme Court has partially lifted the TRO on the no-contact apprehension policy. The policy will be implemented by the MMDA on major roads such as EDSA and C5. The order has been in place since 2022 after transport groups questioned it in several Metro Manila cities. The move comes after the MMDA filed an urgent motion to lift the TRO last week.
A warrant of arrest against Harry Roque cannot be served immediately due to his asylum application in the Netherlands. The Department of Justice says host countries usually wait for the asylum process to be completed before acting on an arrest warrant. So it's now up to the Dutch government to decide whether to immediately enforce a warrant against Roque. Senator Ping Lacson has denied reports that he met with Vice President Sara Duterte. Lacson says such a meeting would be the quote-unquote height of impropriety, as he will serve as a senator judge if and when Duterte's impeachment trial reaches the 20th Congress. Meantime, Lacson said President Marcos may need a strong but well-intentioned bastonero, loosely translated as warden, that someone could enforce discipline and good governance in the Marcos cabinet. Lacson warned that the president's kindness and reconciliatory tone could be misread as weakness by both allies and foes.
And Comelec Chair George Garcia has been expecting Duterte Youth Party List to okay. Walang
Hang yung prompter.
Okay, we will come back to that in a while.
I guess it will say to contest the results because they are challenging the suspension of their party list. Now that they won second place in the election, they won three seats, but yun nga, hindi sila naproklama because there's pending cases against them. I also know that there was a jurisdiction issue, so somebody filed a challenge to the jurisdiction of the Duterte Youth party list. And then there's cases dating back to as far as 2019 when question yung age ni Ronald Cardema.
The age and alleged material misrepresentation of the party list. So,
supposedly hindi nila pinublish, di ba?
Oh no, that's iba pa yan.
Iba pa yun. Okay, so there's a few cases
The material
pending.
misrepresentation is supposed to be because the party list insisted that Cardema meets the requirements as a nominee.
Okay. And now there's a question of jurisdiction, which Comelec spokesman Attorney Laudianco told one of our sister programs na somebody filed a case challenging the jurisdiction of Duterte Youth.
Okay, let's bring in our partners as usual, coming in from Parañaque City. So yeah. Ba't nung laki ng tao ni Ami Pamintuan dyan? Ami Pamintuan, Philippine Star.
Tama naman, Ami
Happy Tuesday. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday,
Fill in
Ami.
the blanks ko lang yung sinasabi mo kay Garcia na dinala ng Duterte Youth sa Supreme Court yung kaso nila.
Okay.
Dadalhin daw.
They've
Yun
filed
yung
already.
expected ni Chairman.
Oo. They did say nga, Duterte Youth said that they will challenge it all the way to the Supreme Court. Yun yung issue here.
Expected naman daw ng Comelec na magcha-challenge.
The question is, what will happen whilst that case is moving, right? So ano yun, they're on hold lang until then.
Well, I suppose the first thing that they would try to do is get a TRO or injunction from the Supreme Court to prevent the Comelec from insisting that their proclamation is
They
suspended.
cannot take their seat.
Kasi may status ko na suspension eh. So you want to put a stop to that if you were in their shoes. Yun, if the TRO is granted or injunction is granted, then they may be able to sit. If not, then they cannot.
Will they be able to sit if the TRO is if the TRO is granted? Kasi temporary lang yun eh.
Yeah,
Will they be able to sit in the meantime? Will they be able to take their oath and
Possibly,
serve?
or an injunction. That would be the purpose if they get that. To stop the Comelec from insisting on its order.
So pwede pala sila ma-proclaim they take their oath, and they sit in the meantime until such time that the COMELEC en banc decides on the case. Parang
It depends on the Supreme Court, in other words, what it does with
how
this
it reads
petition
this case.
of the Duterte Youth.
Oo.
Although they do have a valid question, bakit 2019 pa to pero nakalipas ang pangatlong eleksyon bago mag-proclamation saka pinigil. I'm also getting what Lodjanko saying na if it's wrong, and there's accountability, but also there's the question of bakit, why now?
I don't know if Ami, you heard otherwise, pero ang pagkakarinig ko kay COMELEC Chair, spokesman Attorney Lodjanko is yun nga, may file ulit ng case questioning their jurisdiction. This is the same with the Bagong Henerasyon, which is also suspended.
Yeah.
So Bagong Henerasyon was not able to get proclaimed, and so they're not official. Even though they won one seat, they're also not able to take the
Well, what I do remember is somebody asked the Supreme Court to finally rule on the 2019 pending issue. In other words, it's been pending since 2019.
Yeah.
Hindi niya ginagalaw.
Hindi nga ba gumagalaw, or it was just
Hindi
it was
gumagalaw.
moving along pero hindi lang, they just haven't ruled on it.
For 6 years? 3 elections
COVID
later.
kayo naman.
Well, you know what they say, the wheels of justice and all.
Na-COVID.
Okay, speaking of justice, we have a lot to talk about justice-wise. Let's bring in our first guest. We've got Justice Undersecretary Nicholas T. Usec T. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon,
Thanks
sir.
for making time for us.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Usec.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, Sir Ed.
Hi, sir. You want to start? I'll start.
You start.
Sir, well, we just read an item kanina in our headlines the case of Harry Roque, of course, there's an arrest warrant already issued by an RTC. My understanding of the headline was that we will not pursue it because there is a pending petition by Harry for asylum. I'm wondering if that is all-encompassing. In other words, we are not going to look at other avenues to enforce an arrest warrant validly issued by the court until matapos yung asylum petition.
Ano yan?
Kasi, for all you know, that could take a long time. And of course, that's also their justice system versus our justice system. So how does that work, sir?
Well, he's invoking the principle of non-refoulement, which says that a refugee, particularly the one who's applying for asylum, should not be expelled from the country where he is in, pending the proceedings for asylum. Nevertheless, the non-refoulement principle, that has a lot of exceptions, no? One of which is if the applicant is actually facing serious non-political crimes in his country of origin. So that's one of the things that Philippines will point out, no, when we write our official communication to The Hague on this issue, because that's one of the things that Secretary Remulla directed us to do, is that upon issuance of the warrant of arrest, we have to put on record that this is a case of prosecution for a non-political crime and not persecution. Yes.
So yun po yung distinction, making the point na it's prosecution, not persecution. But I'm also wondering about the other avenue that had been used, for example, in the case of the former president, the use of Interpol. Kasi this is a trafficking issue. I mean, in the sense, it's a trafficking case. I wonder if that's also applicable, going to the Interpol to go for Harry.
That's correct. It's a possibility. We've already triggered the process to request for a red notice from the Interpol, and hopefully, if it's granted to us, it will come out, and we'll see how it goes. So if upon implementation, if the government of the Netherlands will allow the application of the principle of non-refoulement.
This was coursed through the DFA, USEC, or was it the DOJ who worked with the Interpol on this?
It will be for this one is through PCTC,
Okay.
the
So
red notice.
PCTC
But the
pa
other
rin.
communication on the government's view that this is a case of prosecution, it will be coursed through the DFA.
Usec, may balak ba kayo to seek the cancellation of the passport of Attorney Roque?
Yes, no. again, for this, itong mga remedyo natin na to, hindi lang naman kay Attorney Roque, dahil wag natin kalimutan no, na itong kasong to, napakadaming mga respondents, 48 sila, no? Lagi lang na distract ang mga taong bayan dahil kay Roque to, no? So, yung mga remedyo natin, kasama na dun yung pag walang visa ng passport at paghiling ng tulong sa Interpol, sakop nito yung mga respondents na applicable tong ganitong remedyo na to.
But you've
May
started...
legal definition ba yung refugee? Kasi yun yung description niya
Yes.
sa kanya eh. Meron bang international definition yan ng
Yes,
refugee
meron.
status?
If you have well-founded fear, no, a well-founded fear of persecution for on account of your religious or political views, no. So para sa amin, hindi din siya pwede maging refugee, no. Dahil una, wala nga persecution, no. This is a case of prosecution, and he's being prosecuted not for his political views, no. He's being prosecuted for a non-political crime of human trafficking, no. So clearly, tong fear niya it's not well-founded.
When you say you've started the process for requesting a red notice from Interpol, na submit na po yung paperwork, Usec, and around what's the timeline here? What kind of timeline are we talking about? When do you expect it?
ASAP yan, no? So sana umabot this week, no? Kung hindi man next week, no? But there are certain requirements. Like, for example, we have to secure the passports of those different individuals who wish to be subject of the red notice, as well as the cancellation of their passports in courts, no? So among other things, no? So, as I said, no, it's not just Attorney Roque who will be subject of these remedies. Several of the respondents who are similarly situated would be subject of these remedies as well.
You're coursing it all through the Dutch government, but actually 2 weeks ago I bumped into Mr. Roque in Munich, Germany. So he is,
Yes.
of course, free to move around in the Schengen area. Are you aware at this point of his whereabouts?
At this point, no. We noted that Germany, we heard from one source about his being in Germany, and I actually saw your interview with him, so that confirmed that he's in Germany. But at this point, I have no new intelligence on his whereabouts.
Sir, what's the difference if you course it through Interpol versus asking the Dutch government to just surrender him because of an arrest warrant? I mean, is there a difference in the way the system will work, and is it easier to go through Interpol, like what happened with the former president here?
For Interpol, the red notice is a big deal because it covers not just the Dutch law enforcement, all law enforcement that are members of Interpol, that would be covered as well. No? But it's a good point that you mentioned, no, that we can actually, if we wish to, that's another option to communicate with the Dutch government for not even extradition, but a simple expulsion, no, of Attorney Roque when the time comes. Because if you remember, no, in the case of Congressman Teves, former Congressman Teves, that's one of the options that government was exploring, and not just extradition, but also expulsion as well. Because a sovereign state, actually has the prerogative to expel an undesirable alien within its shores, no, without going through the extradition process.
Pero kung expulsion, you need to go through the courts in the Netherlands. Paano yung process doon?
Dito sa Pilipinas, immigration authorities na naman ang gumagawa niya tuwing nagde-deport tayo ng mga banyaga na natin i-deport.
So it doesn't have to be a judicial action.
You know, I'm not sure what the process will be in other countries, but if it's similar to what we have here, it's going to be an immigration concern. If you remember, no, kana Alice Guo, Sheila Guo, tsaka Cassandra Ong, we were able to successfully to classify that, consider that as an immigration concern. That's why their return to the Philippines was much more expedient.
Sir, can you
But you
walk
know
us...
kung ano na yung status ng asylum request ni Attorney Roque? Kasi ang sabi ng lahat, medyo mahaba yung pila dyan baka matagal pa yan na magkaroon ng ruling. Have you communicated with the Netherlands kung ano yung status ng asylum?
Usually, asylum requests, parang hindi naman ini-involve yung government na pinanggalingan, no, ng applicant, no, kasi nga precisely the nature of asylum na sinasabi niya inaapi siya, so but pa kukunin yung panig ng pamahalaan. Kaya nga isa sa mga sinabi ni Secretary Remulla na kailangan mabigay yung panig natin, no, kaya bibigyan natin yung panig natin sa pamahalaan ng Netherlands through our diplomatic channels.
Sir, if you go through the red notice or you go through Interpol, di ba? Interpol does not make the arrest. It asks the host government for the host country to make the arrest,
make the arrest.
for it. In this case, you're talking about the Dutch government. So Interpol asked the Dutch government, and Dutch government will have to make a decision on whether or not, tama ho ba, whether or not to await the asylum petition or whether to just expel him.
That's correct. No? So a lot of it falls in the hands of the Dutch government when the time comes now. So what we just focus on are the things that are within our control, and among other things, that's one of the things that's in our control, to apply for the red notice.
Is there a precedent here, Usec? Have you ever worked with the Dutch government, and what's the status of the relationship like?
Well, we don't have an extradition treaty with the Dutch government. That's one thing that's sure, no. But another thing that's also sure is that the Dutch government takes human trafficking very seriously. In fact, they are one of our partners in a lot of our anti-human trafficking advocacies here in the Philippines. So hopefully, because of this priority that they put in human trafficking, they will be our view, our side will be given some weight.
Right. Coming back to 2 weeks ago when I bumped into him in Munich, I did a quick ambush interview with him, and he repeated the same things essentially, which is this is a made-up case, this is a trumped-up case, wala naman talaga evidence, and under the court of law, for example, kailangan daw i-authenticate ng fiscal yung documents certifying that yes, he was involved in the Pogo hubs, and he said none of that existed, and therefore there is no hard evidence linking him to this case against Pogos. He was just the lawyer on paper. And he says all of that will add to his argument that this is all political persecution. What do you think?
Well, we can address those points of his on many fronts now. First and foremost, let me just go back to what I said earlier, that this case is not about him. This is a case about trafficking victims, rescuing trafficking victims. This is a case about dismantling criminal syndicates. He's just one of 48 respondents in this case. So clearly, at that point, we can already comfortably say that this is not a case of persecution where he's being singled out. Now, as to the evidence that was relied upon by the prosecutors to make their findings against him, it's actually pretty significant. Let's remember the case against him he's not considered as your typical human trafficker, someone who recruits, someone who employs, or someone who beats trafficking victims. No, he's actually one of the organizers of a human trafficking syndicate. And a lot of them were deemed organizers by the prosecutors, and each of these organizers, they had their respective roles, which contributed to the establishment of this trafficking syndicate. So his role was pretty significant, right? Because he was the lawyer who actually lobbied for the issuance of who lobbied for the issuance of the license that would have been used by the Pogo as a smokescreen for it to commit its illegal activities. And at the same time, he kept on insisting before that he's just the mere lawyer of the lessor, the Whirlwind Corporation, and had nothing to do with Lucky South 99.
Correct.
But we could see just how convoluted the operations of Lucky South 99 and Whirlwind was, that it's very difficult for anyone to insist on a clear separation between these two organizations. And then to top it all off, this is not just something that came from the DOJ. Let's remember that prior to the issuance of the warrant of arrest against him, the judge independently evaluated the evidence and came up with the finding of probable cause. So you actually have two branches of government here, the executive and the judiciary, agreeing that Attorney Harry Roque, along with all the other respondents, should be brought to court.
You're right. That's one other argument that he keeps bringing up, which is that he was just a lawyer on paper, and that he told me that this could cause a policy issue in that in the future, lawyers would be afraid to take on cases because baka ma-implicate sila. So that I don't know if that holds any water for you.
Well, let's not forget how these Pogos were organized. No, they were not. It's not a mom and pop operation that just surfaced from the ground. No, it takes a lot of brain power, no, and to establish such a intricate criminal enterprise. And sadly, lawyers were part of this organization. And he's not the first lawyer. He's not the first lawyer who is facing criminal action because of his involvement in Pogo. So some of the lawyers are among those respondents who were investigated by the DOJ.
Usec, you mentioned 48 respondents. Ilan sa kanila yung outside the country?
wala akong exact amount, ano, pero baka mga 10 yan. Madami-daming mga foreign nationals kami nakita dyan, no? Kasama dyan si Duan Renru, yung parang godfather ni Cassandra Ong na parang isa sa mga bosses, no, ng mga pogo na to. So kasama dyan sa mga hihiling tayo ng red notice, no, para mahanap siya.
The other key player, si Cassandra Ong, is still here in the Philippines.
Well, hopefully, no. But she's no longer under custody of any government office now because the House released her, I think, late last year, no, after the termination of the Quadcom hearings, no. But hopefully, no, hopefully we'll be able to find her. After all, PNP already initiated a manhunt for her.
Sir, yung red note, Hani's application is with the Dutch government for asylum but the red notice nga involves everybody who's a member of the Interpol. In other words, if he is no longer or if he leaves Netherlands, then he can be, tama ba? He can be picked up by any of the other governments?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. That's the intention of the red notice, that all layas that are members of that are from countries that are members of Interpol would be in a position to implement that warrant of arrest.
Can he invoke the asylum application outside the Netherlands?
You know, I don't know. That really depends on how foreign law enforcement will interpret that. But if he does, let's see. Let's see how the foreign law enforcement will consider any invocation in his part of his pending application in the Netherlands.
When he is, if and when he is captured, who will take custody of him? Because remember, this became an issue with the Alice Guo and Cassandra Ong cases wherein nag-away-away. Well, hindi naman nag-away, pero nag-aagawan kung sino yung who will take custody over them. And in the end, it went to the House, and one went to the House, one went to the Senate. In the case of Mr. Roque, kanino po siya pupunta?
Hindi ko wala ng issue na kung executive or legislative ang hahawak sa kanya, dahil dito klaro naman, no, may warrant of arrest na, no, galing sa husgado. And so law enforcement authorities, whether NBI or PNP, should be able to take custody. I don't know, I'm not aware of the status of the legislative warrant against him, especially considering that Congress, no, that Congress will soon end its term, no. So but from our end, hopefully there won't be any issue on who will have custody under that hypothetical scenario na mapapauwi si Attorney Javier Roque.
Sir, small detail lang. Go ahead, Ami.
Yung accusation against him is a non-bailable offense typically, no? But can he avail himself of bail kung sakasakali lang?
Yes. If he's arrested or submits himself to the jurisdiction of the court, that's one of his remedies, no. Request the court for bail. That's something that Alice Guo did, or it was denied, no. That's something that Pastor Cabiloy is trying to avail of right now in this case pending in Pasig City.
Ako, sir, small detail lang, at least for us people who write about this issue. Is Harry Roque a fugitive technically or not?
Right now he is, because he already has a warrant of arrest issued by a court for a criminal case.
We were talking about it. Sabi ko nga, fugitive na technically,
yes,
di ba?
Well, that's also what I thought. Pero kasi there are some who argue na if you leave the jurisdiction before the charges are filed, then you are technically not a fugitive, because under the definition of fugitive daw, it's when you
are
leave
on the
after the charges were filed.
And the second point to that is that he insists to this day that he is not on the run, right? I mean, yun nga.
Again, we're not lawyers. We just want to know how he don't get into trouble.
So pwede. Usec.
In our eyes,
Pwede siyang tawagin na fugitive o kaya he is a wanted man. Pwede po siyang i-describe na gano'n ng, media in particular.
Maaari nang sabihin, para sa amin klaro na isa na siya pugante ngayon.
Pugante,
okay. He is a wanted man.
Yes.
Pugante.
Okay, because yeah, to this day he insists. Diba, he just posted a video just 2-3 days ago responding to to the arrest warrant, saying he's not on the run, he's willing to face it, and I believe from my conversation with him that he has filed. He's got people here filing challenge to this on his behalf. So, hindi ko alam if...
Pero sir, that small detail lang. I just need to push that a little bit kasi we might get into an argument with this on this issue later on with some of his supporters or with him himself. I don't remember what the case was. Was it Rodriguez versus the Comelec? Something about whether when you are called a fugitive, parang it had something to do with whether or not you went on the run before the charges were filed or before you were convicted. In which case, that person who was in the U.S. left the U.S. before the charges were filed, therefore he was not considered a fugitive. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there was an argument like that. I'm wondering lang if that really holds water.
I'll have to look into that, no? But ito naman, the preliminary investigation was already pending when he left the country.
Yeah.
That's one thing's for sure. No, wala pang indictment, but tumatakbo na yun, yung PI nung panahon na yun.
Yes, sir. Kasi the charges were filed only late last month, by which time he was already in The Hague.
April, that's correct.
Yeah, he'd been away for a while. If Amy doesn't have any more questions about Harry Roque, I wanted to segue sana, Usec, if okay lang, to the Duterte arrest naman. And I wanted to find out if you had any updates. What came of the hearings that Senator Amy Marcos called? I remember one of the last ones that we covered about this was she presented that what you called a fake and manufactured DOJ document, right, to prove that the arrest was illegal. Ano po yung takeaway from those hearings?
Right now, naman for those hearings, I don't know if there's going to be a next hearing, but as far as for now, we're focusing on the response of our secretary to the ombudsman case that's pending, and aside from that, we'll wait and see if there's going to be any development in the Senate.
But so far, wala pa naman, you've not been invited again. I mean, the DOJ has not been invited again to give testimony. And there's no plan to investigate the bogus document that she presented?
On our end, yung document that she presented, wala pa naman. There's no, I haven't received any word of a need to look any further into that issue.
Okay.
Pero sir, was it determined if it was bogus? Kasi if it was bogus, then wouldn't that be an issue legally?
Well, certainly on our end, no, that document that was presented on that, I believe that was on the task force, no, on the task force that Secretary Remulla created to investigate JK. That specific document that was presented in the Senate, that was pure. No, there was no such document exist. However, some of the contents of that document was lifted from other documents. That we can say now.
So it's a compilation.
So it was manufactured nga. So they picked and chose certain aspects. Somebody put it together, but the actual document does not exist, is what you're saying.
Yes. But parang namang na-resolve na yung issue na yan. I think both Secretary and Senator Amy gave their 2 cents on the issue, and we haven't talked about it ever since.
Well,
Okay.
for now, until at least the next hearing. We'll leave that there for now. Thank you so much for joining Storycon.
Okay.
DOJ
Thank you.
Undersecretary Nicholas T. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Usec.
Thank you.
You are watching Storycon on One News. We just need to take a break. We'll be right back. Please stay with us.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.
We've got developing news and the stories behind the headlines. Welcome back to Storycon or the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Regina Lay, still with us. I'm Iva Miduan of the Philippine Star. I was about to say Ronald Llamas, but of course, he's not here.
And
He's
He's in
nawala ang
prayer.
cellphone ni Ronald.
Oo nga, but again,
Diba?
as always, he's there in spirit. Baka naman they might bump into each other in Europe, si Ronald and si Harry.
Yeah.
But let's bring in our second guest for the day. We've got political scientist and UP Los Baños Professor Antonio Contreras. Good afternoon, sir.
Good
Thanks
afternoon,
for joining
sir.
us.
Good
Hi,
afternoon. Before anything else, I'd like to make a public disclosure. I'm also the vice chairperson of the board of PTB4. I was advised to always say that every time I start an interview.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Thank you for that disclosure. That always helps put things into context, diba? But we invited you today on the basis of your op-ed, the op-ed that you wrote, arguing that the Alyansa para sa Bagong Pilipinas team squandered the impeachment narrative because of their silence. Please talk us through it.
Well, actually, that's just providing a different angle, a different perspective on this narrative, because it is very easy and convenient to blame the impeachment of Sara Duterte as the reason why the Alyansa did not fare well in the last elections. But if you look at the numbers, we are divided. There are a lot of undecideds. In fact, if you look at the finer details of the surveys, while the survey for Pulse said there are more people who disagree with the impeachment, there is another survey that were conducted predominantly on Gen Z voters, the youth, where there's an overwhelming 80% of the people, of the young ones, would like Sara Duterte convicted in the impeachment court. And with the data coming in right now, that there is a huge number of young voters, new voters, that might not have been part of the sample of the surveys because they are not counted in the panel. This could have made a difference. But the problem is, the Alyansa did not campaign on the issue because they were kind of afraid. Maybe they were very careful that Mindanao will not vote for them. And now that they're silent, they did not vote for them anyway. So taking that risk would probably have made a difference.
Mm-hmm. But sir, maybe they were also looking at the previous surveys. It appeared to show that there was some sort of a resurgence by the Duterte camp after the arrest. So baka they thought na parang, yes, sir.
Pero Ed, kasi yung surveys ng Pulse Asia at saka SWS, saka ng Octa, lahat yan nakabase sa dating panel na hindi pa nasasample itong mga bagong voters na ito.
Okay.
So, di ba yun ang conclusion ngayon, kaya naging very, yung hindi natin na-anticipate na papasok si Bam at saka si Kiko at maraming mga upset sa local elections. Kasi nga, yung dating kasi yung surveys na yan, hindi naman na nagpupunta sa field yung mga yan to randomize. They go to a panel. And this panel don't have this new generation of voters.
That's what we were saying then, Prof, na parang they weren't able to capture the sentiment of the younger voters. Pero what would you have them do? Ano yung, because when we were talking to campaign manager Congressman Toby Tiangco, sabi niya, nakita nga nila that after the impeachment, their support in Mindanao really declined by a large margin. So,
but that is again based on surveys that did not interview younger generation voters. It's still using that argument means that the basis of the decision was based on something that may not necessary. And on hindsight, ako naman, ganun din naman, di ko naman sila masisisi, dahil yun ang available. Pero sinasabi ko that you have taken the risk. Because in the first place, even the surveys of Pulse and even the surveys of Octa and all the others, divided, maraming undecided, hindi ng overwhelming majority, it's more of a plurality. And then if you look at it, also in terms, it's not just the impeachment thing, it's also the pro-China thing. You have to understand that based on their own survey, 70% of the electorate would not vote for pro-China candidates. And yet again, the Alyansa did not use that. So the Alyansa talked about governance, talked about projects, but these are the things that are very emotional among people, and they could have just it's more of a contrapuntal to the campaign of the pro-Duterte camp about the fact that Sara Duterte was impeached and Rodrigo Duterte is in the Netherlands. So these three issues, the impeachment, this drug war, and the China issue, which are very important issues based on surveys, were not touched by us. It was they, and therefore the Allianza ceded a lot of ground to the opposition.
Pumalpak nga yung mga survey, Professor eh. Pero anong tingin nyo, anong dapat na direction ngayon? Kasi parang ang lumalabas ngayon eh, nagbabackpedal yung administration, although officially, ang sabi ng Malacanang eh, President Marcos, of course, it's out of his hands yung impeachment, sasabihin nila. Pero sa tingin mo, parang nagsosoften, of course, it's still a political, even if it's a trial, it's still a political process, no? Even at the Senate. Sa tingin mo, kailangan mag-soften nga yung posisyon ng Marcos administration. It's distancing itself, of course, from the Senate. Pero yung naririnig natin ngayon, parang ganon, di ba?
Hindi na nagbago ang stand ni President Marcos, hindi ba? Even before the elections, ganyan ang stand niya.
Yeah.
Wala siya. He is not going to touch the impeachment process. So ano nagbago? Wala.
No, actually, ang sabi niya, he is not in favor. Yan ang sabi niya, he is not in favor.
He's not in favor and he's still not in favor now. So he's saying that let's move on to governance issues. But what is missed in the discussion is yung sinabi pa niyang wala na sa kamay niya yan. Ang proseso yan. Merong proseso yung impeachment. So it's as if also saying, pabayaan natin yan, wag lang nating politikahin.
Yes.
And speaking on the issue of impeachment, alam mo, it's again very easy to count heads depending on the results of the elections. But you have to also look at the different ways that things could change. Like I'm writing a column on this in the future, but I want to say it now. Hindi naman pwede, huwag kakasiguro ang mga pro-Duterte na maaring ang boto ng mga senador ay predicted na. Unang-una, they have to understand that this is a very divisive issue. They have to understand na kapag blatantly, very crucial yung pagdadala ng prosecution team Paano nila ihahayag ang ebidensya? Kasi kung ngumpel ang ebidensya, baka matulad na naman tayo doon sa panahon ni Erap. Di ba, tandaan ninyo nung kay Erap yung pagbukas ng envelope na nagpasayo-sayo pa si Teresa Aquino Ureta. Ano nangyari sa kanya? Di ba, she was pilloried and she even lost re-election. We don't want that to happen. Of course, the electorate, lalo na ngayon na may bagong generation ng voters, hindi natin mapipredict how these people will operate. And even the very sure people, like for example, Bato de la Rosa, many people are saying, oh, he's going to vote now for for acquittal. But you have to understand, I'm not saying that the administration will arm twist him. But what I'm saying is that there is one thing that could pressure him, which is the certainty or the non-certainty of going to The Hague and be arrested. Isa yan sa pwedeng gamiting leverage sa kanya. I'm not saying that the Marcos will do that, but someone can do it on behalf of the pro-impeachment group. Na kung ikaw ba, anong pipiliin mo kung ikaw ay si Bato de la Rosa, makulong ka sa The Hague or bumoto ka na lang to acquit at to impeach? That's one thing. The other thing is, you have also the Villars. The Villars will always go where the business is greener, the business interest. And right now, medyo ang pwedeng gamitin sa kanilang leverage, yung prime water. Right? The Cayetanos will always vote wherever their ambitions will be. So, hindi mo pwedeng basta-basta mag-predict yung mga yan. Kasi it's a political process, and these people will talk about their political futures as well. And the electorate will also play an important role, lalo na kapag maganda ang pagkahayag ng ebidensya, malinaw na malinaw, isa lang doon sa 7 counts ang makonvict si Sara Duterte, tapos na ang boxing.
But sir,
isa lang doon sa 7.
Yes, sir. But sir, there still seems to be a startling shift in the tone of Malacanang. I mean, when they kicked off the campaign, the president was issuing fighting words. Yesterday, the president was not just offering an olive branch; he was offering a tree.
Oh.
The fact that instead of 8 or 9 candidates, only 6, that is if you count Villar, and only 5 you don't count her, won, then the president is actually recognizing the fact that the team did not perform well and they have to do more. But to extend that towards the impeachment issue, I think extending too much. Because from the very start, he was hands off sa impeachment. So yun ang basa ko sa kanya, hindi yung sinasabing, wag na tayo magpa-impeach. Hindi, ang sinasabi niya, kailangan silbihan natin ang bayan. Huwag nating hayaan na itong impeachment na ito ay maka-influence ng ating gagawin o tayo maka-influence sa impeachment sapagkat yung prosesong yan ay gumulong na. I think that's what the President is saying.
Pero how can he distance himself kung yung pinsan niya, yung nangunguna ron eh? Di ba? Sa chamber, which will be prosecuting eh.
Well, you have to understand that his sister is also the one opposing it. You know, so it's pinsan and sister. You know, it's
Pero yung
apparently
kaaway na niya eh. Yung
apparently
pinsan hindi eh. Close na close sa kanya eh.
apparently bloodlines, you know, are not usually in this country. You know, you even have local officials where families are fighting each other. So I don't see that as a factor here. Of course, there is always a possibility that other people are doing it on his behalf. It is also a possibility that the what we call the visible narrative would be different from what is going on behind. You know, we can always surmise na baka ano lang ito, act, or it could be a strategy to say I'm softening but others are not, you know, are doing it the other way. This is practically a game of thrones, you know. It's basically a political war where we are all spectators. We are all spectators.
Does the administration really have that much leverage when it comes to, say, a Bato de la Rosa? Because, okay, if as everyone expects, the ICC arrest warrant comes out, tapos they request the Interpol for help, it's not like the government can say, oh, we're not going to help you, right? Because we're part of the Interpol, and ngayon nga, before this interview with you, we were just talking to DOJ Usec who told us that they're asking Interpol for help to bring back Roque and some of the others that were charged in the human trafficking case. So merong ganong relationship din, merong ganong a reliance on Interpol. So it's not like the government can say, okay, we are not going to give up Roque. Bato de la Rosa, right?
Well, you have to understand that, you know, the thing that was not present during the time of Rodrigo Duterte was the time. The warrant was served in the morning, and then the afternoon he was flown away. There was no time to go to the courts, but the court can intervene this time, right? The court can intervene. They can have a TRO of some sort, which did not happen during the time of Rodrigo Duterte. And as regarding the leverage, you have to understand. Well, I'm not suggesting that the court will be mobilized, but that's always a remedy. But also the leverage, you have to understand that the president is still president for 3 years. Many people are saying he's already lame duck. Of course, it's going to that direction sooner when the 2028, as we go near to 2028. But, you know, even if Alianza did not win the majority, only 6, even, you know, but you have to, they still control the House, and at the same time, you know, the president is still the president. He still has control of the levers of government. You know, so it's he can still dispense favors. He can still withhold benefits and privileges. It's something that we should not discount.
Sir, may feedback from
Paalala ko lang yung public stand ni Bato de la Rosa sa impeachment is he will vote based on evidence. Yan ang madalas niyang sabihin. He has not said na he will vote na talagang pro Duterte siya, that he will vote for Sara. Ang lagi niyang sinasabi, I will vote based on the evidence.
Yes, and Bongo is all quiet about it, you know.
Si Bongo sigurado na yun na ano.
Well, hindi natin alam yon. Depende rin sa ambisyon niya sa 2028.
Oo.
Diba? Depende rin sa ambisyon sa 2028 kasi alam naman natin, di ba, na, well, based sa chismis, sa mga marites, Bongo and Sara are not in good terms din naman.
Are not in good, have never been in good terms.
So you have to understand that Bongo is the thing that might be an unknown here. We always assume, but that could be different. Ang medyo ako nga talaga na para sa tingin ko, certain lang nabuboto dito na for now, I'm sure is Robin Padilla.
Si Robin Padilla.
Jaime Marcos and Rolante Marcoleta. Yun lang pwede kong, I could be wrong on the two, but you know, yung pa lang ang certain sa ngayon sa mga nilalabas nila. Pero yung iba, hindi natin mapipredict yan. It depends on the evidence. And someone even asked me, paano lulusot si Bato, kunyari, o mga yan? Madali naman sasabihin, magiging dramatic flair pa na sabihin nila na although they are friends with the Dutertes, they're loyal, but this is about evidence. This is about accountability. This is about a higher order thing of being a statesman. O hindi, imagine, pogi points pa yun sa electorate.
Oh.
Diba?
But
Prof, may quick feedback from Ronnie Holmes.
wait lang. Follow up ko lang dun sa comment ni Ami very quickly. Ami, you're correct. He has never publicly said that he will vote for Sara during the impeachment trial. But on election day, tinanong ni Ed what the numbers were looking like to him. Nakausap namin si Senator Bato de la Rosa on that day mismo when it was clear he was gonna win. And he said, feeling niya, 5 or 6 na sila, and they can easily get another 3, right? So, and Ed was trying to get the names out of him, but ayun sabihin, and we were trying to find out, okay, who are you talking to? But he also wouldn't say. But at that point in time, at least, it felt like, for sure, certainly he would vote against the conviction of Sara Duterte.
Tsaka hindi pa nga napipresent ng evidence di ba? Hindi natin, doon ang magiging,
I
ang
think
magiging play.
the prudent thing for all of them to do is to say, I cannot comment at this point.
Yeah.
But that's the prudent thing to do.
Oo. Yan ang utos ni Cheese, di ba?
That is
Yan
the
ang
prudent
paalala
thing to
ni
do.
Cheese sa mga
That's not
kapwa niya
necessarily what they
senador
do.
Sa bagay,
Oo,
sa bagay.
wag na muna
Okay.
kayong dumaldal kasi na
Sa bagay.
pag-judge kayo
Correct. Okay.
Prof, quick feedback from Ronnie Holmes, ang head ng Pulse Asia. Professor Tonton is incorrect. We do multi-stage random sampling and have respondents from Gen Z to boomers. So
Well, that's good. That's good to know. I'm just getting it from the feedback from other people who are commenting. Maybe Pauls did that, but others hindi ko alam. Kasi but boomers is different also from itong kasi kung ang sa surveyin mo ay 18 years old and above, yung mga malilipat na bago, baka hindi nabilang yung mga young generations na pagiging new voters. But I don't know how Pulse Asia did their sample, but it's good to know. Thanks, Ronnie, for pointing that out. But I think that's where we need to improve on because surveys were way off this time. So there must be some reflections on what should be done next.
It's also unable to capture yung mga hard votes versus soft votes, and also how people
Masyado
respond.
daw complicated, di ba? Sabi ni Ronnie Holmes.
Oo.
It's going to be a stratified survey, so pinag-uusapan nila ngayon kung anong gagawin nila next time.
Well, we'll see. Certainly, this election left us with a lot to take away and to chew on. We're going to have to leave that there for now. Thank you so much for joining Storycon, political scientist and UP Los Baños Professor Antonio Contreras, also the Vice Chair of PT.
PTV4.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks for joining Storycon today. That's all the time we have. Unfortunately, I'm your Pamtuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star. Join us again tomorrow, 4 p.m. for Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
Wala si Ronald Llamas, you almost read that. Pero si Ronald Holmes,
Nasa prompter
wala
Nawala yung cellphone.
Oo nga.
Nawala yung cellphone.
Ano wala yung cellphone niya?
Nawala cellphone niya sa Rome. Ano ba kayo?
Ano ba
Nawala
yan?
yun. Naiwanan niya sa taxi.
Ay, nako.
Naiwanan niya sa taxi yung kanyang cellphone.
Kaya pala
Kaya hindi siya makakontak sa atin.
Kaya pala
You
hindi
can
siya
get in touch with
nagre-reply.
him sa Telegram if you like.
Okay. Okay, kaya pala
Yan
hindi
ang
siya
hirap sa mga
nagre-reply.
yung mga
Boomers?
Yan.
Gen Z. Sabi niya
Pagkain ganyan.
Sabi niya Gen Z siya. Gen Z. Okay, sa mga Gen Zers. Okay, ikaw yan.
Okay. Oh, he's in Vienna already.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's in Austria.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Ed Linga. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.